Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory.
We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. If you desire to integrate this learning practically and supportively into your life, then Soul-Driven Motherhood is your space to go deeper. Head on over to nourishingthemother.com.au or follow any of the links on our socials for Soul-Driven Motherhood.
We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we're so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner, and today's podcast is Finding My Boundaries, Early and Gently versus Late and Angry. And we loved this because this came from a beautiful listener's email, and the listener questions are among our most just reveled in experiences, and the ability to meet you where you're at is something that will profoundly continue to light our hearts for, I think, as long as we live. So we're really super grateful for those emails and messages that allow us to extend the conversation that helps you in your life, because that's what this podcast was born out of. And more especially, just born out of a conversation that we felt like we were the only ones in the world having. Put it somewhere that meant anyone in the world could find it who wanted to have those same conversations. I just always find that a really beautiful space. So thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to meet you where you're at. Before we jump into today's podcast, I'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au. Scroll on down to the red banner, pop in your email address, and then every so often we send out an email with everything that you need to be a click away from where you're ready to dive deeper. So nourishingthemother.com.au. Come join our community.
So when this email landed in our inbox and I was thinking about it, it reminded me a lot of a blog post that I've read from Janet Lansbury before. And if you listen to this podcast, you're likely familiar with Janet Lansbury in the respectful, gentle parenting kind of realm. And she talks about, is yelling the new smacking? From the sense that, modern parents aren't smacking anymore, but they're finding themselves yelling instead. And her lens on it, which I tend to agree with, was that it's, again, parents not, honouring or recognising first what boundaries look like for them and how to communicate them early and communicate them in a way that our children can understand. And when we don't listen to what our boundaries are, then we'll do everything we can to try to claw them back, which looks like exasperation, frustration, yelling, resentment, all of these things that we can get to when we haven't listened to what those boundaries are, which can change day to day, hour to hour as we parent. And I really loved that reminder because, even when I've hit, big frustration points, or I've noticed a couple of days in a row of trying to get out of the house and it just being a shit show, and then realizing, okay, so what hasn't worked here? Where do we have to go? What do I have to shift to make that work properly? Because something hasn't.
Is that me or is that you?
I don't know. I'm just trying to figure that out. Something's pinging away and I'm trying to find my do not disturb.
It's specific to Messenger. So individual message, it doesn't matter if you've got do not disturb on or not, Messenger will still ping.
It's Messenger. That's what that is. If I close everything down.
We have to shut Facebook down, or you have to mute your individual conversations. So it could be mine, but there's so many conversations in there that I'm not going to spend my time individually muting each of them.
No, I've just closed my Facebook completely, so hopefully it was mine, and therefore we've dealt with that issue.
Sorry, because we're streaming Assaulted in Motherhood.
Yes.
I can't close my Facebook.
Anyway, we're back. So the conversation was, yes, this listener reminded me of that article that I've read before, and really come to that place of, yeah, I see that in parents. I see that in myself. Sometimes I see that in the parents that I work with, certainly, and in the desire to be this connected mother, or this mother that paves the way for our children to feel lit up, inspired, raised with great values, then we can sometimes not listen to our needs in that pursuit. And when we don't listen to our needs, we get needy for our needs, which looks like frustration, anger, all those things.
Yeah, I think we're living in a society that orchestrates an ideal of motherhood in which you don't have needs.
Yeah, in fact, I've seen that characterization. We've kind of moved past that. Like even in the early 2000s, it was like, the kids are overscheduled, and all of the activities is the problem with kids today. But it's almost moved into this intensive mothering, is held up as like the pinnacle of your achievement, if you can just be intensive and on to everything all the time and have all your ducks in a row, and then if you fall short of that, well, then you've fallen off this thing you can't meet, but that your whole culture is saying to you, but this is who you need to be.
Yeah, totally. So I think first off, we just really want to let this listener know that you are not alone, and that this is, I think, every woman's experience, whether she will say it out loud to you or not. I do think that this is something that all of us will hit potentially multiple times in our motherhood journey. Because the truth is, boundaries, I think we have this idea that if I just got my boundaries right, if I just put them in place and there were these cemented brick walls, that then I'd be fine. But that is such an untruth. And I wish to let you off of the, bandwagon.
A illusory path.
Yeah, that boundaries are anything that's solid. Boundaries are entirely flexible and movable. They're more like a shoreline than they are a brick wall of a castle. So boundaries, your understanding of your boundaries, your understanding of your needs, will continuously be in change, because you are not a static human. The way that you see the world will continuously shift, and therefore, and ages and stages of your children and your own ages and stages of life, all of these things put in this delicious meeting point of all of the different oceans, and there's different borders and boundaries that meet at those places. So I always think of boundaries as more like the beautiful ecological meeting places where new life is formed. And there's a term, and I wish I could remember it for those exact spaces, and I cannot. But by all means, Google that. But I have these visions in my head of the most beautiful boundaries that I've ever seen across my entire lifetime. And one of those that I hold very dear in my mind when I'm contemplating my own boundaries is when I was a child in England, and we had this beautiful oval in our primary school. And this oval was one of those pristine, it was like a staggered and stacked 3-tier kind of massive playground. And so at the very top was the oval, and it was the most pristine, beautiful, lush, green, English countryside grass that you can possibly imagine. And then fringing the entire skirt of that round oval or play space was an English forest. And this English forest, sometimes there would be deer that would wander out onto our playground. And there were trees of the most glorious installation that would have nuts that we would turn into a ball game and throw at each other, or chestnuts that we would pick and take home to roast. And new life and all of these beautiful burgeoning forest animals that you could sit there and just delight in. And I often, in my mind's eye, put myself in exactly that fairy tale, boundaried grassland and forest edge, because it's the meeting of the two where the greatest magic happens. There's the me in the oval, and there's the me in the forest, and there's the meeting of all of us in the middle. And that's more what a boundary is than any type of walled, concreted, bricked, solid fortress.
Yeah.
So think of the most beautiful and meaningful landscapes for you. The edge of a river that opens into this beautiful wide mouth and meets the ocean. There's a boundary there. There's edges. There's new life. There's life that literally lives only in that meeting point of river and ocean. There's banks that are different. Like, consider all of the ways that boundaries are in flux, and all of the new life that begins there. And I find that more inspiring than defeating, because it means that as I'm moving and growing and changing and reevaluating and learning myself better, because we have this idea that we become adults and we just kind of know ourselves. And it is such folly, because we are here to grow, and every single year we grow in new ways. Sometimes they're bigger leaps than others, but we're always growing. We're always finding out who we are and what we need and how we play and what best nourishes us now in this season of life, which may not be the case in the next season of life. You need something completely different when you're pregnant to what you need when you're a mum of a teenager. So you are always going to be discovering yourself and what is most deeply nourishing and sustaining for you, and nourishing and sustaining for your family and its ecology. And the merging of the boundaries of all of those things together get to be something that's a beautiful tango, more than it's a violation or an acquiescing. So I would love for you just to contemplate those words in terms of knowing that you never kind of just nail your boundaries. There isn't this point at which you arrive and you're boundaried.
I see that. I mean, it's a practice.
Right.
It's a practice. And some days you'll be really well, a little bit like some days you're really attuned to your child and you can sense everything in them, and you feel like you can pick up the way that their eyes kind of divert, and then you're like, oh, there's something there. And then other days you might miss it, right? Just like some days you can be really attuned to your own needs moment to moment, and so you'll sense that point at which you're about to lose yourself. And then other days you won't be so attuned to yourself, and it will only be when you find yourself well past where your boundary would have been had you been attuned, that you then go, oh, I missed that. We missed that, like we didn't tune into that ecology and the shifting environment here, like the shifting sands of my needs and your needs and the whole here. And so we kind of need to look at that again. And I love that permission to see it not as this boundaried versus unboundaried binary thing that's going on, because it's not that black and white.
No, exactly. Exactly. That's what I really want to hone home to your heart, is you're not unboundaried. You have boundaries and you're learning your boundaries. And you get to change your boundaries as you change and your children change, and you learn each other more deeply and you learn what you need more deeply. And I do think that that's the grace of age, hopefully, is that you're growing in such a way that you learn yourself with a greater clarity and a greater depth, and therefore you're able to attune to what you need with a greater depth. And unfortunately, when you're younger, you're really defined more by an external world than potentially what you are as you age, and you know, that power moves further and further inwards. So my point is, in motherhood, is I don't want you to assume that because your boundaries got overridden that it means you're unboundaried, or that because your boundaries worked yesterday and they didn't work today, that means there's something wrong or your boundaries aren't right. It's more about having a gentle, compassionate heart and a sense of grace in understanding the play that is happening here, the movement and the growth, and taking more of, as Bridget opened this conversation with, a bird's eye view or a stock take or a reconciliation of what is working and what is not right now. And I'm probably going to need to do that reconciliation or stock take every 3 months, because that's how much and how fast, particularly in motherhood, I'm changing and my children are changing. Like really, every 3 months, your values may change. The way you see the world and the perceptions you have will change. How you know yourself and your children will change. Every 3 months, it is an accelerated growth pathway. So every 3 months, you probably need to be doing a reconciliation about, okay, where are we at here? Where am I at? Where are they at? What's working? What's not? And if I know the things that are not working, it allows an enormous freedom to put in place structures and understandings of new boundaries that are deeply respectful to both of us. And that can become an outward conversation rather than assumed knowledge or a continuous fighting at the edge of my boundary because no one's particularly clear on what it is. It can change and you can be clear. They're not separate things.
Yeah. And that the fact that it's changing is not you being fickle or not holding your boundary. It's that you are owning your transient nature, particularly as a woman, you know, which is ever changing.
Exactly. So we would really love for you to do a reconciliation and seriously look at what is working, what isn't, and what you need to put in place so that you get through your day with the greatest amount of ease. And as Bridget said, if you know getting out the door on time in the morning is the biggest 0 to hero trigger for you and you need different boundaries, cool. What are they? And then what do you need? And what do your children need? And what does your partner need in order for those boundaries to be met? Because it's actually not enough to just say, here's my boundary, boom.
Yes.
There actually needs to be a deeper level of respect, which is you've been used to functioning this way and there's been part of me that's trained you to this way and now I've changed the game. I want it to go this way. That doesn't mean I'm going to let you flounder and fuck it up and I'll get angry at you every time you fuck it up because I've changed the rules and you don't know what the rules are. I've changed the rules and they're beautiful. They're going to make your experience beautiful and my experience beautiful. What do you need to be able to meet those? And that's how you move forward in an integrated way. That's how boundaries are met, not by anything that's hard and fast and looks like a castle wall.
I love that.
So, Bridget, when we started this, that was one of the points we had. The other point that we had when we were ruminating on how we find our boundaries early and gently versus late and angry was that you really check in with how it feels in your body.
Yeah, so for me, if I'm noticing that my space in between, perhaps say the request from my child and my reaction to that request, or my like felt body sense of irritation to that request is, you know, like minuscule, then I know that my body is telling me something here and that I am perhaps feeling resentful. I am perhaps registering my children's needs or requests as like an emergency in my body. So it's like my body is already in this like fight or flight place. So I'm not anchored. I don't actually have this space. I don't actually have my bases covered here if I'm in that place. So that's a good spot for me to do a check myself and ask myself, what's going on here? Because I'm parenting from a place of irritation, or I'm parenting from a place where I'm not across it all, or I don't feel in my body right now. I feel pulled in different directions. And so I need to come back into my body. And so what that looks like for me is consciously getting in it. So breath, movement, taking a moment with my child to say, you know, I just need to connect with myself for a minute and make that a priority for me to then address what the broader needs are. Because if I'm in my head and I'm not spending time in my body, then I'm not present. And so I'm not actually acting the way that I would desire to act with my children.
Yeah, definitely. And then one of the other points you had was, where do I lose myself the most and how do I make this more easeful?
Yeah, for me, like, and I love that, as like, you know, you mentioned about the getting out the door on time. That's definitely my probably biggest trigger. And I actually remember, I still have this felt sense in my body of like my mum roughly putting us in car seats as a child. And so I think it actually taps me into that, the childhood of being rushed. And so I can be totally unreasonable about getting out the door. And so I know that. And when I'm well practiced, so I've, you know, come out of school holidays prepared, for example, and know this is my trigger, then I have like time blocks. So I set up the morning in 15-minute increments so that I know, you know, XYZ needs to be done by 7:30. And by 7:45, this needs to have happened. And by 8 o'clock, this needs to have happened. So that I have a window for a child to have difficulty putting their shoes on, or another child who doesn't want to stop playing. And I have buffers around those so I can still hold on to myself and parent them through those hard parts gently and respectfully and get out the door on time. If I haven't set up my morning to meet those, you know, time bands, and then a child, you know, and I'm kind of like down to like, I've got 5 minutes for this, and this ship needs to sail, and no child can have a need outside what I've, like, you know, got for them, then I can really easily lose my center because I've left no room. I've left no spaciousness for us to get where we need to go. Yeah, so for me, that is a really big one, because I can't pull out all of my great parenting tools when I know we're about to be 10 minutes late for school, you know, if this toddler won't get dressed, you know, for example. So that's a big one, is knowing what those, I guess, knowing what your kind of kryptonite is and setting yourself up for to succeed through it, right?
I really love your structure of 15-minute increments, because for some people you're like, fuck, that sounds like a regiment. But actually what it is in your mind, it's like a checklist, so that and each time you're checking that list mentally, it's like a soothing to your nervous system.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like if for instance, like a morning like this morning, Mondays are our worst in terms of needing to be gone by just after 8, and my husband often isn't here, so it's me with three children, and I knew we were cutting it fine this morning, and so I put music on. I like moved myself to my edge and worked with it, and then as I knew we were cutting it fine and I was going to have to make a choice between what I did first, I thought, I'm going to do everyone getting dressed first, and the last 5 minutes I'll get myself ready, because I'm much better with myself and not losing it with myself than with a child. I don't want to bring my 5 minutes of anxious energy to the dynamic of dressing my 4-year-old, because it's not really going to go anywhere good if I'm struggling to hold on to myself. So I'm going to use that 5 minutes with myself. So I also make those on the hop like decisions as I know, you know, I'm about to hit my kryptonite, you know?
I actually just think that's so wise. I hadn't ever extracted that out into such succinct thinking, but now that you've said it, I'm like, it's freaking genius.
Well, it just came to me this morning as I was like making that like way up in my head of what am I going to do next? And it was like, I'm going to do these things first and then save myself for last, which, you know, kind of flips on its head, that whole thing of putting your oxygen mask on first. But actually that was putting my oxygen mask on first, was being in the service first and getting so that I knew that all they had to do was put shoes on and would be in the car, versus me being 100% ready and then having Sylvie not want to stop playing Lego, and then, you know, you can know where it can go from there.
I think it's super wise.
Yeah.
The last point that I want to leave you with before we wrap up today is a little bit of a whippy one, because, you know, what is a conversation with me without a little tiny bit of the crone energy?
A whippy one? Oh, yeah, okay, sure.
Which is this: no one, including your children, takes advantage of you unless you let them.
Yeah.
There's been many a conversation that I've had in my own head and that I have projectile vomited out onto whoever will listen to my, you know, outrage at
your tirade.
The injustice of all of these people that just take, and, you know, and they don't even consider, and they don't value, and they don't appreciate, and, you know, all of the verbal diarrhea that comes with that. But the truth is, they're not doing or taking anything more than I let them. So really, is it the fault of my friend or my family member for doing those things to me? Or is it the fact that I didn't say you can't? No, that's the boundary. I can't. Sorry, no. So that's been a really interesting lesson for me to watch, and one that certainly follows a family narrative for me for many, many years, and one that I still find myself preaching to my own mother, which is do it because you really want to and there's a love that comes with that, or don't do it. Don't do it and then be shitty and angry and resentful to everyone else about the fact that you're doing the thing that you chose to do.
Yeah. So be a full-bodied yes or be a no.
Right.
Yeah.
No one takes advantage of you any more than you let them. And that is your children included.
Yeah.
So that's my tiny little, please just self-check any projections that you have, because whenever we're doing a you, we need to be considering an I.
Yeah, so if you just switched out the you don't ever to I don't ever, you know, to actually just flip it around, like turn it around and see how it feels and sounds in your body.
Yes. So that is our finding your boundaries early and gently versus late and angry. And we really hope that there is some story medicine in there for you. We would love to hear if there is. So please let us know via socials or Nourishing the Mother on Instagram or Facebook, via our website, nourishingthemother.com.au, and email connect@nourishingthemother.com.au. We would love to hear how it has influenced or rippled out for you, insights or openings that you've had, and if you yourself have a podcast topic request.
Yes, please send them through. We love it. And to connect with you, Jules,
is julietenner.love. And you, Bridge?
bridgetwood.life. And we will see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
You just hijacked.
I just totally hijacked you. Hang on. What's mine?
Do you want to say it that way?
I know. I
we can.
No, I don't. I think
Let's just break the rules.
So hang on. So I say, remember to nourish the woman to rock.
How about I say that?
Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey. Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
And if you're ready to ask, in what ways can I show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can I mine the wisdom from the experiences of my life and expand into those challenges? Then you're a soul-driven, heart-led mama who's ready for conversations and a community that supports her journey. Come join Soul Driven Motherhood. We'd love to have you.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.